They're never going to admit wrongdoing. What they're going to do is they're going to spin it the best way that they can. But thank goodness for the citizens of California. Thank goodness that they're pushing back and they're giving President Trump the ground that he needs to continue to go after these cities, these states, and say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to sue you. We're going to take you to court. We're going to get these policies declared illegal. Thank goodness.
Now, 37 jurisdictions, guys, are part of this. So 37 jurisdictions, all but one are sanctuary jurisdictions. L.A. itself, you saw in that map, had 16. Austin had 11. Santa Clara, California, which we don't delineate it this way, but that's we do all the California all in one. But Santa Clara, California, 22. Montgomery County, Maryland, which is just minutes from where we're broadcasting, had 5 gang members released and 84 from the year 2012 to 2018 in the shadow of the nation's capital. Those are MS-13. Hector, let's go to you.
So these sanctuary policies just encourage more illegal immigration, and they also encourage more crime within those cities. Some of these illegal alien criminals know that if they make it to California or to some of these sanctuary cities, they know that they're free from law enforcement, and they don't have to work from law enforcement, and they will not be deported. That's why these sanctuary city policies are very, very dangerous. Well, we see these criminals being released, and then we also see them pouring across the border, and we definitely need to secure the border with that. In just a moment, I'm going to share with our viewers the number of people who crossed our border in March. I almost fell out of my chair when I read this. But first, I want to play Jamil Shaw's father, who was on Fox and Friends this morning, speaking about Governor Jerry Brown, given the fact that he says we're not going to pay for any National Guard troops to do the work that Donald Trump wants us to do. Let's watch.
He just doesn't even care about the victims, like we're just dead bodies or a piece of trash in the cemetery. And then he's defending these legal alien gangbangers and criminals and hold them up like they're good people, knowing they, from day one, they broke into the country, and then they just pillage the communities. No one does anything.
Brandon, very quick reaction.
First off, you have to feel for him. You have to feel for the family members of these victims. When you're talking about Maryland, I mean, we had that girl that was raped in school in a bathroom. We have got to stop this. We've got to secure our border. We've got to get behind the president.
That case was, I mean, I think it was reported one way at first, and there were plenty of other cases that are brutal and horrific, right in Northern Virginia, by the way, and in Montgomery County. I told you guys I would reveal the number of border crossers, and just in March of this year, there was a huge spike. 37,393 people crossed into our country. Many of them will be released back into society because of our ridiculous credible fear rule that has been abused. We don't have time to get into.
Schedule your free consultation today. We'll even talk about financing options. Call Clear Choice today.
All right, before we go, let's take a look at a tweet that came my way about the angle tonight. Remember to tweet me, by the way, at Ingram Angle. Tweet from Debbie. Great show. Loved your angle tonight. I agree with you that Mike Pompeo is a fantastic, super qualified candidate for Secretary of State. The Dems just want to be obstinate at the cost to America. They can't stand that Trump picks great nominees. Mike Pompeo should be confirmed, and Democrats who oppose him, it's just pathetic, and they should be called out, especially the moderate Democrats, supposedly moderate Democrats. That's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Bream and the fantastic Fox News at Night team take it all from here. Shannon.
Thank you so much, Laura. I am Shannon Bream in Washington, and we begin with a Fox News alert. Former FBI Director James Comey making multiple media appearances today. At the very same time, the Department of Justice he used to work for sending the media 15 pages of redacted memos he wrote about his meetings with President Trump. Meanwhile, the Justice Department's Inspector General has sent a criminal referral about fired FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe to federal prosecutors here in Washington. We've got team coverage tonight. Chad Pergram digging deep into the Comey memos for us tonight. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is following Mueller, Comey, Cohen, McCabe, and more. All the intrigue for us tonight here in the nation's capital. All right, Ed, so late breaking, several memos. Anything jump out to you that may actually help the president?
Yeah, it's interesting. You've got 7 Comey memos, about 15 pages released. This was at the urging of House Republicans, as you know. And there are some details here that seem to help the president. president in the sense that these are summaries, the memos, of James Comey's either meetings in 2017 or phone calls with the president of the United States. And there's one that does jump out from March of 2017, where James Comey says that the president kept telling him not to shut down the Russia collusion investigation, but to try and go public with the idea that the president was not personally being investigated. And in fact, at one point, Comey, by his own account, you can see, says that the president said to me, look, if there's any satellite, any advisor, any ancillary person connected to my campaign who was involved with Russian collusion, that should be investigated. Go for it. But I just want you to tell the public that I'm not being personally investigated. This is something we've heard before, but the part where the president is saying, lift the cloud over me, but if somebody did something wrong, go for it, it shows that at least by James Comey's telling, the president was not trying to obstruct justice. And by the way, nowhere in these memos is there any new information suggesting that there was collusion with the Russians, Shannon.
All right, so Ed, there's another Comey memo that seems ironic now, given what happened to Andrew McCabe today. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is another one where if you look at the quote, I'm looking down to try to find it, where basically in January of 2017, they had a meeting. Remember, they had this dinner in the green room. We've heard about this before because, remember, Comey leaked some of these memos, which Republican Charles Grassley says has classified information. And we know that there's some classified information because the versions we have are redacted. They're blacked out because there's sensitive information in here. And yet James Comey not just put the memos together with classified information, but leaked some of them out. And here's the key part. In trying to explain, the context is Comey trying to explain why he thinks he should stay on as FBI director as he and the president discuss it over dinner in the green room at the White House. Comey says, quote, I added that I was reliable in one way, but not in the way political people sometimes use the term. I explained he could count on me to always tell him the truth. I said, I don't do sneaky things. I don't leak. I don't do weasel moves. That Jim Comey memo saying I don't leak and the FBI doesn't leak comes on the same day that the Justice Department Inspector General, Shannon, has had a criminal referral go to the U.S. Attorney here in Washington for Andrew McCabe, Comey's number 2 at the FBI, for leaking information to the press against the rules at the FBI and then lying to investigators about it. And yet James Comey is saying in the memo, we didn't leak. We're not leakers. And yet this very same day, we're learning that McCabe is in criminal jeopardy. Now, McCabe's camp is telling us tonight that they think there will never be criminal charges brought by the U.S. Attorney and that he'll be vindicated. But he is in criminal jeopardy tonight for leaking and lying, Shannon.
Okay, so what about Rod Rosenstein? What are you learning about details about what he may have told the president in the Oval Office last Thursday with respect, we think, to the Michael Cohen investigation? Yeah,
well, last Thursday, we knew that there was a meeting between the Deputy Attorney General and the president in the Oval Office. We didn't have all the details. Tonight, it's breaking through that, yes, they talked about the Mueller probe, which Rosenstein oversees, as well as Michael Cohen, and those raids of his office and home. And what we're learning is that Rod Rosenstein, when asked by the president, said, you are not the target, Mr. President, of the Michael Cohen investigation. That follows what we heard last month when we learned that Rosenstein had suggested to the president that he is not the target of the Mueller probe, and that, in fact, the Mueller's own team had told the president's lawyers that. Why is that significant? Well, that suggests he's not the criminal target, the president, of any of these investigations. Instead, he is a subject, meaning that his conduct is being investigated. So he's not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, but that they don't have evidence to charge the president with crimes. Now, that could change. They could find more evidence. These investigations are ongoing. But the bottom line tonight is the president's team is being told he's not a criminal target at a time when James Comey and Andrew McCabe and some of the investigators find themselves under fire, Shannon.
It's very interesting combing through these. All right, Ed, thank you very much. A few more samples now from the memos to tell you about. Comey wrote that he told the president at a White House dinner last January, quote, I said, I don't do sneaky things. I don't leak. I don't do weasel moves. While discussing the salacious, unverified, dirty dossier, Comey writes this, the president told him, quote, it was a complete fabrication and fake news, and it bothered him if his wife thought there was even a 1% chance it was true. In March, Comey, quote, reminded him we weren't investigating him. He said it would be great if that could get out. Fox News senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram joins us now. All right, what are they saying tonight on Capitol Hill, Chad? Because they pushed to get these memos over on the House side. Now they have them.
Well, first of all, starting with the Republicans, they would say that with James Comey, in his mind, the real culprit or the real person who's the victim here is James Comey, the fact that he got fired and was basically saying, I want to work for a president who he didn't agree with necessarily. The other thing that's notable here is that they say, and this comes from Devin Nunes, the chair of the Intelligence Committee, Trey Gowdy, the chair of the Oversight Committee, and Bob Goodlatte, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, in kind of this tripart statement where they say that Comey was blind to the biases of the FBI, defended Andrew McCabe. Now, the other side of the story here are the Democrats. Elijah Cummings, Democrat from Maryland, the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee, he says that there were contemporaneous notes here, meaning that there's some veracity to what Comey was saying. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi immediately said that Comey, or basically the president here, that was exuding contempt for the rule of law. That's a talking point that she has used repeatedly and tried to tie this back to the possibility that he might fire Robert Mueller. I think it's very interesting that the Republicans tried to chide Comey, talking about the level of detail that he gets into, the height of the tables and the way the dining room was arranged. That's kind of a way to say, come on, why don't you get at some real facts in this description, just not, the atmospherics of the room.
Well, it sounds like both sides are finding things in these memos that they want to use to their advantage.
Right, absolutely. If you're the Republicans, you might say, why did this get out? You have a situation here where Comey is being praised by the president, saying he had an impossible job to do dealing with the Hillary Clinton email situation right before the election, asking him to stay on. And so, the flip side, though, if you're Republicans at the White House, you might say, well, there's no corroboration here with the Russians. There's no evidence that there was any, trying to collude with the Russians in any way, shape, or form. So at the end of the day, you have both sides saying there's something in here that kind of exonerates us.
Well, anything else that jumped out to you? I mean, it was 15 pages, some of it redacted, but there was plenty there for us to sift through.
Yeah, and going through the first part of it that dealt with these allegations of Russian prostitutes the president allegedly may have been involved with. Now, this is stuff that came from the Steele dossier here. We had been hearing about this for a long time on Capitol Hill, Shannon, that there were allegations about this, and that Comey wasn't saying that it was true. He makes that clear at one point in the memo, but just saying this is something that's out there and we want to talk about this. And the president said, no, there was never any issue with prostitutes in Russia circa 2013. The president indicated to Comey, according to Comey, that he presumed that every room that he slept in, any hotel room, was wired. The other thing here is that that he praised Comey. He said, you really did an exceptional job. I think you've, conducted yourself, beyond reproach. And then, of course, we know what happened with James Comey in May of last year.
Yeah, it started out differently. At least according to these memos, there was some positive relationship at some point that later fell apart.
Absolutely.
All right, Chad Pergram, thank you for staying up late
Anytime.
with us. Good to see you. All right, so what does it all mean, if anything, for the special counsel probe? As you may recall, the Judiciary Committee is moving forward with a bill to protect Robert Mueller, any future special counsel. Well, I spoke a short time ago with a key member of the committee. I started by asking Senator Lindsey Graham about the committee moving forward with this legislation, despite the fact he's being told it's going to go nowhere.
Here's my goal. I have no belief that President Trump is going to fire Mueller or Rosenstein. I think that would be a disaster. Quite frankly, I think President Trump's going to come out of this thing okay if he'll just watch what he says. But this protects special counsels. All it says, if you get fired, you can petition a court within 10 days to see if you were fired for cause. There's a regulation that says you can only fire a special counsel for cause. This gives a check and balance for this all the way for the future.
So even if the committee moves forward on this and Senator Grassley says, yeah, we consider what the majority leader says, but that doesn't dictate what our committee does.
Right.
Is the worry about putting it to a floor vote that it would fail, that not enough Republicans would vote for it, and it would be a bad reflection on the GOP?
All I can say is that I think special counsels are not political appointees, but they're not civil servants. So what am I trying to do? Make sure that if a special counsel is fired in the future by a political appointee, the judges can look at the firing to see if it was for a cause. I can tell you this, if the roles were reversed and this was Hillary Clinton saying these things, we would be all for this. So I'm trying to make sure that special counsels in the future have an ability to protect themselves by going to court and making sure judges agree with the firing.
All right, another big vote coming up in the Senate on Monday. Senate Foreign Relations is going to vote on the nomination of now CIA Director, hoping to be Secretary Mike Pompeo. But there has been at least one very vocal Republican critic who says he's not going to vote for him, and he just doesn't think he's the right fit for the president and what he thinks is the president's foreign policy.
Well, let me tell you, Rand Paul ran for president, got beat like a drum. I ran for president, got beat like a drum. I think we owe it to President Trump to give him the ability that every other president has to pick a qualified person to be Secretary of State. You know, Rand Paul is a libertarian. There's no way Trump's going to pick a libertarian. I hate it when liberal Democrats basically neutralize the election. They don't recognize Trump winning, but they expect us to vote for Obama's people. So Rand Paul is a member of the Republican Party. He's undercutting the Republican president, who's picked a highly qualified Republican, the #1 in his class at West Point, been a member of Congress for, I think, 8 or 10 years, is now the CIA director. And if that's not enough, President Trump picked Pompeo to meet with the North Korean leader because he has that much confidence in him. So I would say to Rand Paul, honor the results of the election. You lost, I lost, and there's no way in hell you can say that Mike Pompeo is not qualified for this job. I'm so disappointed in Democrats. I voted for most all of Obama's nominees because I thought they were qualified. Elections matter. You know, I said that when Obama won. Yep. He deserves his own cabinet. But it bothers me greatly that a Republican would join with Democrats to undercut this selection by President Trump. Pompeo needs to be on the job tomorrow. There's a lot going on in the world, and I can't believe the Senate would deny President Trump as Secretary of State, who's highly qualified at a time when the world is really on fire.
Yeah, and let's talk about North Korea, because he took part in this very high-level meeting. We think it's the highest level between the two countries since at least 2000 with then Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. This is what the Wall Street Journal is now saying. They said South Korean President Moon Jae-in said Thursday that North Korea had dropped its longtime insistence that the U.S. remove its 28,500 troops from the Korean Peninsula ahead of a planned summit, saying that it only sought a security guarantee and an end to the U.S.'s hostile policy. Now, North Korea has not in any way publicly confirmed that, but does it sound to you like they're legitimately softening on some of these issues?
The only reason they're at the table is that they're afraid of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has done a heck of a job of convincing North Korea that he's serious when he says, I'll never let you hit the homeland with a nuclear weapon. Every president before him was played by North Korea. The only reason they're at the table is because of the fire and fury rhetoric. They believe that Trump, if he had to as a last resort, would use military force to protect America. Now that we're at the table, Pompeo is a perfect guy. He's the CIA director. He understands the world. So we're here at a moment of tremendous historic opportunity. Trump said, I'll walk away if I have to. I won't go if I don't think it's going to be worth my time. But here's what I think. I think President Trump has a chance not only to get North Korea to give up their nuclear weapons, but end the Korean War. It's never come to an end. What about a peace treaty between North Korea, South Korea, China and the United States? And for that, to normalize relationship with North Korea, we ask that you give up your nuclear weapons. South Korea doesn't have nukes. Japan doesn't have nukes. You don't need nukes. I give President Trump and his team tremendous credit, and we're on the verge of something potentially very historic.
I want to ask you quickly, as an attorney yourself for decades, what you make of this Inspector General referral of Andrew McCabe, the former #2 at the FBI, a criminal referral to the U.S. attorney. His attorneys feel very certain it's not going anywhere, and it certainly doesn't mean there'll be anything formal beyond this point, but what do you make of it?
Well, Mr. Horowitz has the reputation to be fair-minded. He was basically a Democrat, but I think he's doing a good job. The attorneys can say what they would like, but it would bother me greatly if I was Mr. McCabe's lawyer to have the Inspector General say, I believe a crime was committed here. Now, Mr. McCabe is presumed innocent until proven otherwise, but I think this is just another example of how corrupt the Department of Justice was. And one thing about Comey, Rudy was a good choice by President Trump to be on his legal team.
Giuliani.
But I've been a prosecutor and a defense attorney long before I got in politics. If Jim Comey were my witness, I don't think I'd have a snowball's chance in hell of convincing anybody that he's reliable.
Well, he's had a lot to say on all sides of a number of issues. Senator, thanks for coming in. Good to see you tonight. All right, could it turn out to be a real battle? Primary challenger, actress and progressive Cynthia Nixon is cutting into New York Governor Cuomo's lead, striking a nerve with many New Yorkers.
We're a blue state. We're a proudly Democratic state, but we've got a governor in there who governs like a Republican.
And in Texas.
Spectrum. Think forward.
The fight for the Democratic vote in the New York governor's race is on. To some observers, they say the governor, Andrew Cuomo, is heading dangerously far to the left as he faces an insurgent challenge from actress and activist Cynthia Nixon. But Nixon does not think he is nearly progressive enough. Kristen Fisher is on this story tonight. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Shannon. Well, this was supposed to be an easy win for Governor Cuomo until a celebrity challenger entered the race exactly 1 month ago today. Now, initially, he dismissed Cynthia Nixon's candidacy as, quote unquote, political silly season. But many analysts say he would be wise to remember the lessons of the 2016 presidential race. Never underestimate the power of celebrity and never overestimate the importance of political experience. And there are some signs that Governor Cuomo may be starting to get nervous. In an op-ed out today in the New York Daily News, Governor Andrew Cuomo is quoted as telling leaders of the Progressive Working Families Party that if unions or anyone give money to these groups, they can lose my number. Those groups are groups that have endorsed Sex and the City star Cynthia Nixon in her insurgent campaign to defeat Cuomo in the state's Democratic primary. On Twitter, she's given her opponent a nickname, Andrew the Bully, and on TV, she's out to prove that her candidacy isn't as silly as the governor claimed.
Is it a serious run? Are you really doing this, or are you being a gadfly right now?
I am 100% running to be governor of New York.
He's running on a progressive platform, and it's pushing Governor Cuomo even further to the left. He was already facing criticism for not doing enough to block a parole board's decision to free convicted cop killer Herman Bell. Then yesterday, he granted New York parolees the right to vote.
I'm unwilling to take no for an answer. I'm going to make it law by executive order, and I announce that here today.
Last month, he also participated in a die-in to protest gun violence. And then last week, the native New Yorker claimed he was undocumented and challenged officials to deport him.
I'm an Italian-American. I came from poor Italian-Americans who came here. You know what they called Italian-Americans? Back in the day, they called them WAPs. You know what WAP stood for? Without papers.
Now, keep in mind, Governor Cuomo still has a huge lead, 31 points according to the latest poll, but he's also lost 16 points to Nixon in less than a month. His favorability is also down 49%. So add it all up and you can see why Cuomo may no longer think that Nixon's campaign is so silly and why he may be moving further and further to the left on all of those issues, Shannon.
He is. We're going to highlight some more. All right, Kristen, thank you very much. So are Democrats pulling too far to the left in their primary battles? Will it work in the general elections? What about Democrat, by the way, Beto O'Rourke down in Texas, putting up some tough polling against incumbent Republican Ted Cruz? We're going to talk about all those things with Fox News politics editor and author of the Halftime Report, Chris Tyrwell. That was sort of like a superhero sound.
Yes, exactly.
Like you were flying through
I need
time
that
and
everywhere I
space
go.
to get here.
Right, and an opening band.
We like that. Okay, so let's talk about this. First of all, Governor Cuomo, you heard some of the things that he said.
Oh, yeah.
He is also saying this in addition.
I'm undocumented. You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
I'm just truly, legitimately confused about that, because if he has a birth certificate, he was born here, his parents were here. I'm not sure where he's going with that.
I'm taking him in a meta. First, they came for the whatever that he is saying. He is that as New Yorkers, solidarity all together. If one of us is undocumented, all of us are undocumented. We should start with the understanding that Andrew Cuomo is, by my estimation, perhaps the most overrated politician in American politics and government today. The hype that has surrounded him, because the love for his father, he inherited the press, and Democrats of a certain kind had this huge reverence for his dad. A lot of it carried over to him. He's not a good campaigner. He has not been a particularly successful governor, but I don't think that Cynthia Nixon is going to beat him.
What do you think, though? I mean, she has made up 16 points. Do you think he's feeling a little bit of the heat? Because she's saying he acts like a Republican. He's not really a true New Yorker. He's not far left enough for us.
Well, and obviously he knows what her problem is. Her problem is she stinks with people of color. The key to winning Democratic primaries in New York is what? You need black voters, you need Hispanic voters, you got to have them in large numbers because that's the dominant base of the party. And she is, I don't know whether you noticed this, kind of white. a little bit, and she is going to be very popular with Team Bernie, right? She's going to be very popular with very liberal white people, but just as Bernie Sanders struggled with African-American voters in the Democratic presidential primaries, that's an issue for her. So when you see Cuomo sucking up to African-American interest groups and doing that stuff, that is him trying to head her off at the pass and capitalize on her weak spots.
Okay, let's take it to a totally different race. This is down in Texas now. And we've got a Quinnipiac poll down there showing the Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke to current Senator Ted Cruz, the GOP guy. 47, Cruz up by 3 points, 44 over Beto O'Rourke. That is within the margin of error. Does that surprise you at all? Do you think this breaks away at some point? Because O'Rourke, by the way, is also up 14 points over Cruz with independents. Do they matter in Texas? Who's going to turn out?
Already day they matter. So Ted Cruz has a challenge, and that is the suburbanites outside of Houston and outside of Dallas and outside of, Texas is a state, I believe, that 4 of the 10 largest cities in the United States are all in Texas. And they got a lot of suburbs with a lot of wealthy, college-educated people. And Cruz's challenge in Texas is not as red as you think it is.
Not as it once was.
Well, Texas is only about as red as, let's say, Minnesota is blue. It's consistent, but it's not by 20 points. It's a narrower margin, generally speaking, than we think of just because we associate it as being the capital of Republican America. Those suburban voters don't like Cruz, they like Cruz less than, and they definitely don't like President Trump. So you put that together, that creates a tough spot, and if intensity is as high, if Democratic intensity continues to be as high, especially among Hispanic voters, about this issue and about deportations and walls and blah, 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 if all of that is going on in Texas, that puts Cruz in a tough spot. And he's not raising enough money. Beto O'Rourke is hauling in cash hand over fist.
Raking it in.
And he is almost doubling up Cruz. And Cruz needs the money now. The reason he needs the money, he's got to define O'Rourke. O'Rourke's only doing as well as he is because 30% of the people didn't know enough about him to form an opinion. So Cruz has got to get on TV and he's got to attack him and say he's a liberal, horrible human being.
Well, listen, I got to tell you, I've heard from my tweeters out there and my Facebookers who say these polls are ridiculous. They are Texans and they believe that Cruz is going to cruise to a very big victory. So we'll have to see. For now, that's the Quinnipiac poll. Take for what it's worth.
The internet says a lot of things.
Yes, it does. Some of them are true.
Some of them are actually true.
All right, Chris, thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right, Trace Gallagher is up next. An abortion activist facing deportation gets a big break as her supporters accuse the administration of trying to silence her by enforcing the law. That story's up next. And some churches say they've got a new policy. They refused to call the police.
Money managers. Fisher Investments. Clearly better money management.
This is a Fox News alert. Gilchrist County, Florida, reeling tonight after 2 sheriff's deputies were gunned down in cold blood while they were eating at a restaurant. Investigators say it appears to have been an ambush from outside. The suspected shooter is also dead outside the restaurant, no name yet. President Trump tweeted his condolences to the families and friends of the officers lost in the line of duty. Well, an activist who advocates for abortions for all, including illegals, is getting a reprieve tonight from an immigration court as she fights deportation. Much more to the story. Trace Gallagher is here with the details. Hey, Trace.
Hi, Shannon. Alejandra Pablos is an immigrants' rights activist who has organized a number of protests against the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. She also had an abortion, saying President Trump's policies would devastate the families she would create. She was released on bond today after being in jail since March 7th. Her supporters say the reason she was jailed for more than a month is because ICE was targeting her work as an activist and trying to silence her. ICE officials say they do not target immigrants' rights advocates. And it's important to note that while Alejandra Pablo and her supporters are pointing fingers at ICE, they're forgetting that Pablo was a legal permanent resident of the U.S. until she got arrested for driving under the influence in 2009 and then got a felony DUI in 2012. Those are crimes involving moral turpitude, meaning she can be deported. But instead, she was set free on bond and told to stay out of trouble. Then 3 months ago, she was arrested during a protest
in Virginia. Again, she was set free. But a month later, the Supreme Court ruled that people being held for possible deportation are not entitled to get bond. So last month, when Pablo showed up for a meeting with immigration authorities to modify her bond, she was jailed for violating the terms of her release. Now she's been released again and wants to petition the governor of Arizona. Watch.
We got to ask Governor Ducey to do the right thing and to pardon me, to let me stay here without fear. I'm tired of feeling scared. I'm tired of being persecuted for just, defending my life and defending everybody else. And
Pablos has also filed for asylum, saying her work as an activist would put her in danger in Mexico. Meantime, in California, the First Congressional Church of Oakland has joined a few other San Francisco Bay Area churches, pledging to stop calling police, period. Not for the homeless who often refuse to leave their church, not for the graffiti on the walls, not even for acts of violence. Church leaders say because of the way police treat people, especially people of color, they're better off without them. So instead, the churches will teach their members how to handle violent situations without arming them. Other churches that were asked to join the anti-police pledge declined, saying they appreciate their relationships with police. Shannon.
Trace, thank you very much. Let's discuss both these hot topics with our panel tonight. Fox News contributor Jimmu Green, Lawrence Jones, editor-in-chief of Campus Reform, and Fox News radio host Todd Starnes. Welcome to all of you.
Hi, Shannon. Good evening.
All right, Jimmu, I want to start with you. I mean, there was one woman in this article about the churches no longer participating with the police, saying it was her religious obligation not to get involved with the police, to divest from policing. What do you make of this?
I think it is a sad state of affairs, Shannon. Hopefully we can all agree that if some of our most important community leaders have gotten to this perspective when it comes to how policing is affecting black and brown bodies, there is no circumstance where there should be a fractured relationship between our clergy and police. I'm hoping that we'll see police departments see this drastic action and try to make some changes, try to address the issues that are being brought up. I'm here in Austin, Shannon, a block away from Central Presbyterian, where I grew up in the Presbyterian Church, and they were the first ones to welcome in aid patients for fellowship when others were not doing that. And I see this as a very similar moment. But this is not something that should be permanent. I hope it is something that is a catalyst and not the type of attacks on law enforcement that we've seen from President Trump, relentless personal attacks, but real conversations about how to improve policing in this country.
Let me say what one of the individuals quoted in this article about the church, Chuck Wexler. He's the executive director of the Police Executive Research Forum. He says, it's disappointing to hear when a community or religious organization decides they're not going to engage with the police anymore. Police need the church. They need an active clergy. They rely on them. Lawrence, what's your take?
Whatever happened to Scripture where it says follow the laws of the land? I mean, the church has a duty, not just from a biblical standpoint, but from a legal standpoint, to report crimes when they see them, or if they have any evidence of a crime being committed. But I do think that the church, that I would be wrong if I didn't say that Oakland has had problems with their community and the relationship with the police. But that's the perfect time to invoke God, to invoke religion, to get both parties to come together, and just by having faith as a means to do that. And I think the church is really missing an opportunity to get both sides involved.
Well, and Todd, some of the churches that were approached said, that's not just going to work for us. I mean, we actually have a better relationship that we want to work on with the police. Some say, no thanks on this idea.
Yeah, look, Shannon, hearing that report from Tracy just tells me there's a whole lot of stupid across America right now. Look, we don't have a police problem here. We have a crime problem, a morality problem. Black, brown, white, you name it, that's the problem. And the church needs to be addressing those issues, maybe teaching the 10 Commandments in Sunday school instead of attacking the police.
Okay, I want to make sure that we get all of you to weigh in on the story as well about this immigrant who is here. She did have legal permanent residency at one point, but then a number of criminal charges and convictions, and so she is set for deportation. That was started back in 2013, but tonight, and she has just been released again after being taken in. Her case is allegedly going to be heard in December. Todd, we'll start with you and work back. What do you make of the delay? And she says the Trump administration is using this against her because she's spoken out against them, and now they're going to try to kick her out of the country.
Well, I hope they do. And shame on that judge, by the way. This is a very dangerous person. A, she's an illegal alien invader. B, she was arrested twice for DUI. And C, the only thing worse than an illegal alien is an illegal alien who supports Planned Parenthood. So the question is, are they targeting these illegal alien activists? I hope the answer is yes, and I hope they send them right back to wherever they came from.
Okay, quickly to Lawrence and Jammu. Lawrence, Planned Parenthood is supporting her, too, because of her activism on pro-choice issues. They say that her arrest is part of a broader pattern of the Trump-Pence administration using ICE to single out immigrant rights activists for speaking out and working to mobilize their communities. Lawrence, quickly to you, then Jammu.
No, I don't like this conspiracy, and I think it sends a bad message, and I hope Jammu will condemn it since she talked about the Trump administration going after law enforcement. They're literally doing their job. She could have killed people with two DUIs, and it seems like they're not concerned about this. This is a criminal. This is a person that's here illegally, and she should be deported.
Well, and again, Jammu, she did have legal residence at one point, but because of these criminal matters, that is in question now.
Yes, and I hope that she was held accountable for those crimes. The reality, though, is, Shannon, that ICE has been really pushing the boundaries of decency. They've been camping out at courthouses to arrest, people who are testifying. They've been going into hospitals, arresting parents who are there with their children. They have arrested domestic abuse victims. And certainly we are seeing a pattern where immigrant activists who have spoken out against these boundaries being pushed, they are now the target of ICE.
But did they commit a crime?
This is not how law enforcement should be operating.
Jammu, their job is to enforce the law.
Out of revenge. We got to go. We got to leave it there. But I will say that ICE has said their only priority is going after criminals. They're not going to go after Dreamers or DACA kids or anyone else. But we will continue to watch this case, see what happens in this particular one, and keep everybody updated. We hope all three of you will come back soon to talk about it.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you all. All right, political hype. That's what some are claiming the Pompeo meeting. This is a Fox News alert. The president just tweeting his first reaction to the 15 pages of Comey memos released tonight by the DOJ to the media and to the House. Several committees who'd requested them over there. Here it is, tweeting just moments ago. James Comey memos just out and show clearly that there was no collusion and no obstruction. Also, he leaked classified information. Wow. Will the witch hunt continue? Well, stay tuned. All right, we're learning more about CIA Director Mike Pompeo's discussions with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Pompeo nomination now to become the Secretary of State. That nomination is now pending in the Senate, and his critics are claiming the meeting was just a means to hype his nomination. Is that a fair assessment? Jillian Turner takes a look.
He just left North Korea, had a great meeting with Kim Jong-un, and got along with him really well.
President Trump's making it clear he thinks Mike Pompeo is exactly the right man for the job when it comes to laying the groundwork for negotiations with North Korea. Plenty of his critics on Capitol Hill are now voicing concern about that choice.
Well, this administration continues to marginalize the State Department. I mean, there's no reason why the CIA should be pre-negotiating a meeting between the North Korean leader and the U.S. president. That should be the State Department's.
But other senior lawmakers point out the usual rules of diplomacy don't apply in this case because the U.S. doesn't actually have formal diplomatic relations with Kim Jong-un's regime.
We've always known that our contacts with North Korea have been through the intelligence community, so I think it made a lot of sense for him to be the person to meet with him. I can understand why that question might be raised, but our back channel to them has always been through the CIA.
Even if President Trump wanted to conform to tradition and send his chief diplomat, experts are quick to point out the reality. There's no permanent Secretary of State currently in place.
Within the range of people who are currently in government, in positions of authority, who have and can reflect accurately America's policies, President Trump's policies, and the North Koreans will pay attention to, Mr. Pompeo would seem to be one of a very, very small group of people qualified to check all those boxes.
Previous presidents have sent their intel and national security chiefs to hammer out sensitive diplomatic matters in the past, including 2014, President Obama sent his director of national intelligence, Jim Clapper, to negotiate with North Korea. In 1998, President Clinton sent CIA Director George Tenet to attend Mideast negotiations that resulted in the Y River Accords. And in 1971, President Nixon sent his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, on a secret trip to negotiate with China. Experts also point out the president chose Pompeo to lead this effort because he believes the North will listen to him. He is straddling the top intelligence and diplomatic posts. It's also widely known that Pompeo is one of Trump's most trusted advisors and that he's fully authorized to speak on behalf of the commander-in-chief. Shannon?
Jillian, thank you very much. Time now for Where in the World. Officials in Puerto Rico say could still be another 24 to 36 hours before power is restored to near 1.4 million customers. An excavator who accidentally downed a transmission line is being blamed for the island-wide blackout. Violent protests erupting in France over new changes President Emmanuel Macron wants to make to the country's labor laws. Rail workers resuming their strike this week, threatening months of new transportation disruptions over Macron's plans to overhaul the nation's state-run rail company. Chilean students taking to the streets of Santiago to demand government-funded education. It is the first major protest against conservative President Sebastián Piñera's month-old administration. And scuffles breaking out in Nigeria's National Assembly. Check this out. After a thief brazenly grabbed the body's ceremonial mace, which is a symbol of authority of the legislature, and took off with it. He just runs out. The mace usually sits on a table near the Senate president, and decisions can't be made without it there. The intruders escaped. Their identity is apparently unknown, but the mace was found under a highway overpass not far away. Well, despite President Trump's alleged affairs and his sometimes salty language, his popularity among evangelical voters is sky high. We'll dig in.
Or Explorer. Plus, get 0% interest for 60 months. Dave Knapp Ford Lincoln, your home here.
Trump's support from religious leaders, but is it fake news? Well, Jenna Browder had Inside Scoop. She is the host of Faith Nation on the Christian Broadcasting Network and joins us to talk about some interesting recent developments. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's talk about this Pew poll. And you know these numbers because you followed them, have been pretty consistent, pre-election all the way through. White evangelical Protestants, 78% of them say they continue to support President Trump, regardless of any of the salacious headlines or things that come out about the past. Was it they kind of factored these things in when they were making their decision about him? I mean, they're not surprised by this.
Right. These allegations that are coming out, you're right, they're not a surprise. And they kind of knew what they were getting going into it. But Christians who we talk to, evangelicals, they will tell you that they're not voting for President Trump because of his tweets or because some of the things he's allegedly done in the past. They're voting for him, Shannon, because of policy, things that he continues to deliver on, issues like the Supreme Court and the federal judges, Israel, all of these issues, abortion, that are so important to evangelicals.
So they're more about the policy than the man and his continuing support. Now, I want to ask you about this meeting that was held among some religious leaders at Wheaton College, you know, a very sincere Christian institution. They gathered there and they said that they were going to talk about all kinds of different things where evangelicals could be doing a better job on immigration, race relations, and those kinds of things. But apparently somewhere along the way, there was a lot of discussion about President Trump. I want to read something one of the organizers said. He said, when you Google evangelicals, you get Trump. When people say, what does it mean to be an evangelical, people don't say evangelism or the gospel. There's a grotesque caricature of what it means to be an evangelical. And apparently there was some discussion that at least led to some controversy within this religious meeting.
Yeah, well, you know, so it was this more moderate evangelicals who were having this meeting up at Wheaton, and it was supposed to be about evangelism and faith and something that was kind of unifying. But from sources who talked to CBN News, it was that, but it also became kind of an anti-Trump bashing party. And Shannon, some people even ended up walking out. This was a 2-day event. They stayed for the first day, but after the second day, they said, before the second day even started, they said, no thanks, not for us.
So it seems like many of them want to get away from the political connection to evangelism because they're saying now that you use this term evangelical and people have a misperception about what it really means. And they're saying we don't want to be aligned with somebody on either side of the aisle. We don't want it to be a political connotation.
Well, Tim Keller, big-time pastor out of New York, he put it well. You know, today we kind of have blue evangelicals and red evangelicals, and that's so true. I will say that most of the evangelicals, they do fall in that red category. They are the Trump supporters. That Pew poll, 78% supporting him, 81% voted for him in the election in 2016. So what we're seeing in some other reports, you know, that this it's kind of 50-50. Definitely not the case. And this group of evangelicals who was up at Wheaton was certainly in the minority.
Yeah, and we understand that they are looking towards having a big meeting with him in June. A number of religious leaders, evangelical pastors, he had a similar meeting with them during the campaign, too. So we'll keep an eye on that, as we know you will as well, Jenna. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you with us. All right, tonight, that is it for us from Washington. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful that you chose to spend the evening with us. We always like that. Good night from Washington.